Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Nora Tobin. I'm the Executive Director of Self-Help International, and I'm delighted that you've all chosen to take the time to join us for our virtual Lunch to Empower Global Women. As we are getting signed in, folks, you are all muted when you enter. This is to control our background noise, so you can unmute yourself to ask questions or request to be unmuted when the time comes. We'll take questions towards the end. You can also control whether or not your video is showing by clicking on the small camera icon on the bottom left of your screen. We invite you to send questions or comments throughout the presentation. There's a chat feature at the bottom of your screen there. And if you experience any technical issues, if your chat feature is working, you can chat Susan Cornforth, who's available to assist. Or if you're experiencing challenges that don't let you use that feature, you can certainly give Susan a call at 319-352-4040. Our team is pretty great at empowering women and sustainable community development. We are not hired for our Zoom expertise, which I believe is evidenced by the fact that I thought I was sharing my screen right now, and it looks like it's kind of an odd screen share feature. So I'm trying to figure out how to get that switched over so that we can do the full screen share. Jessica, can you tell me, am I sharing my screen right now?
I am not seeing your screen.
All right, I'm going to try that again then. How about now?
Something's happening.
Excellent.
Are you sharing a screen that says welcome?
It should, yeah.
Yep, then I see it.
Awesome. Fantastic, thank you. This is great news. We are off to a wonderful start. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate your time today. I'm going to attempt to go to the next slide, and we'll see what happens here. Woohoo! We're in. All right. Well, folks, we are off to the races. Thank you again for joining us and taking the time to join our virtual Lunch to Empower Global Women. My name is Nora Tobin. I'm the Executive Director of Self-Help International, and we are all about empowering women and alleviating global hunger. And this is our, I think it's our 8th year of this luncheon. And we want to first and foremost thank our sponsors for making this lunch happen year in and year out. Keith and Nancy Swanson, Terry and Maureen Tobin, Berkshire Hathaway Energy Foundation, and Foster Group are our lead sponsors this year. But it takes a village, as with most things. And so we're grateful to all of our sponsors, Teresa and Lance Erskine, Paul and Claudia Schickler, Jim Tobin and Gina Hegney, Cynthia Thorland and Fritz Weitz, and West Bank. And I think most of those folks are on the call today. We're really grateful for your support. Many of you have gotten to know Self-Help over the years and are here to join us as a fundraiser today. And many of you sent your contributions in ahead of time. So thank you for all that you're doing to make this important work possible. Today, we're here to alleviate hunger by helping people help themselves. That's what we get to do every day in our work at Self-Help International. And we are based in Iowa. That's where our headquarters was founded back in 1959. And we have incredible teams in Ghana and in Nicaragua that are working every day to carry out those programs to do sustainable community development work. We've got locally led teams of skilled professionals. My colleague Benjamin Kusi leads our Ghana team. He's been with Self-Help more than 20 years. My colleague Jorge Campos leads our Nicaragua team. He has also been with Self-Help more than 20 years. They just do amazing work, making sure that they're listening to communities, meeting the needs in the best way we can, and adapting and incorporating best practices along the way to make sure that the academic research, those best practices, the things that people are studying and learning about, that information and knowledge actually gets to the farmers. So throughout all of our programs, whether it's working on clean water, whether it's focusing on improving agriculture, fighting malnutrition, or empowering women, which is actually key to just about everything that we do. Our program model combines training and the resources to put that knowledge into action. So today we get to tell you about what has been happening in the last year and where we're going in the year ahead. But in particular, what I'm really excited about is we have a wonderful guest speaker with us today. I got to know Betsy, gosh, it was back in 2014 or 2015 when she was our first speaker at our very first ever Lunch to Empower Global Women at the World Food Prize Hall of Laureates. And at that point, self-help was really well known in Waverly, Iowa, and among Methodist churches in the state of Iowa, and not as well known to other people across the state and across the nation. And so Betsy helped us with being our first guest speaker as we convened this group of folks in Des Moines for our first ever Des Moines-based fundraiser. And so she's the author of the book 100 Under $100, Tools for Empowering Global Women. And that was the feature of her talk in that first time that we had her with us. But she's since released a new book, 100 Under $100, Tools for Reducing Postharvest Losses, which was published by postharvest.org and is also available online. She is such a passionate advocate for empowering women and serves on a number of boards to put that into action, and is also, on a personal note, a wonderful grandmother as well to little twins. And so we get to talk about that Growing Healthy Food, Growing Healthy Children program, because that's, you know, so universal as well. So Betsy, thank you for joining us. We're so excited to hear what you have to say, and I'm excited to connect that to all of the work that we're doing later in the program. So Betsy, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute, and hope that technology keeps working for us there.
You can hear me, everybody?
I can. Wonderful.
Great. Well, thank you, Nora. When I wrote the book 100 Under 100, one of the tools, I divided it by sector, and there was a big section on agriculture because women comprise a really huge percentage of the world's small farmers, as I'm sure many of you know. And a small farm is not an Iowa-sized farm. We're talking about 1 acre, maybe. And one of the tools that I included was something, the PICS bags, the improved crop storage bags. And because that was and for each of the items in the book, for each of the tools, I wanted to pick a place that the reader might want to support directly. And the support for the PICS bags is the Gates Foundation. And I didn't think that anybody really needed to be supporting the Gates Foundation. So I went looking online and I found the postharvest.org Foundation. And that was how I connected with Dr. Lisa Kitanoja, who is out in Oregon now, and she's on the call. So I'm really excited to share this with her. About a year after the book came out, Dr. Kitanoja got in touch with me and she said, you know, we have at least 100 tools specifically for post-harvest loss reduction. And I'll explain what that is more specifically. And how would you like to write a version of your book that would be just on that topic? And I was kind of amazed, and it took me about 10 seconds to say, I'm on it. I want to do that book. So it was taking one tool and zooming in and finding 100 different methods that are tried and true. Some are old classics, some are new and innovative. And it took a couple years to get that book out. And Dr. Kitanoja was with me all the way because it was a lot of it was, there were great stories and a lot of it was very technical, and I had to get the technical stuff right. So we talk about post-harvest loss and waste. In the rich world where we live, the problem is waste. We are just careless, and we can talk about that a little bit later. That is not the problem so much in the global south or in low resource areas. People don't typically waste things because they are food insecure, but there is just a lot of waste that happens all along the value chain, at the farm, in the packaging, in the transporting. And today what we're going to focus on is in storage. Inadequate storage means that all that labor and all those resources that go into raising crops, and we're talking about unmechanized tiny farms where it's somebody with a heavy shovel doing the manual labor. When that is lost, it increases food insecurity, and all the resources that were tied up in the food production are lost too. So the estimate about food loss is that it's about 30 to 35% of all food on Earth that is raised does not make it to a stomach. So the book that I wrote, and it's, I think next slide, Nora is gonna show you what it looks like. And the book is focused all along the value chain, and it's a big PDF. The book is, there you go, that's what it looks like. It has a lot of those icons in it. And you could, we'll send you the link or put it into the chat, but it's free for download. And the book was written, it's an English book. It's written with a minimum of lingo. PDFs usually are highly, highly technical. This book does have a lot of footnotes in the back for people that are more scholarly or more really need more information. But what I tried very hard for each tool was to tell the story and why it works and what the difference is that it makes. Next slide, please. The book is aimed at what is called an extensionist. And since you live in an agricultural state, you know that extension services are generally provided by either a university or the government or the local county. And the extension agent is a well-educated, trained go-between. We have all this information about how to do things and how to solve problems. And the breakdown is getting that information to the farmer. And there are lots, we have more and more ways of doing that. When farmers are not literate, obviously handing them a pamphlet is not going to be very useful, but between WhatsApp, which I know Self-Help International takes a lot of advantage of now that most people in your populations have cell phones, farmers can share direct information with each other, and the extension agents can create groups and get out information. Radio is still a very important tool, but probably the most important tool is the extension agent herself. And when I say herself, that's kind of a new thing. Usually it would have been, and still is, himself. The first picture that I have here is an extension agent. It is the woman wearing the apron, Odette Ngulo in Tanzania. And she is doing a training, and she's teaching men how to bake a cake, which is kind of cool. And the cake that they're baking is quality protein maize cake. I know that is your signature. I think that was your original foundational innovation, and raising health maize corn that has higher nutritional value. And she's showing people how to work with it. And I don't know that these men are the ones that are going to bake the cakes, but do note that they're baking the cake over a 3-stone fire, because in a lot of the places where we're talking about, they don't really have, they're not cooking with gas. Let's just say that. Okay, next slide, please. Odette works on training, and the idea that we now have female extensionists is very exciting, and she is a specialist. Becoming a post-harvest expert, which is done with training, a lot of it provided by the postharvest.org Foundation, means that this is a new field, and it helps. A lot of extension agents focus on expanding the yield of crops, which is great. But if we still are losing 30%, it's such a waste, literal waste. And this way, getting more information out to farmers about how to preserve their crops will expand the yield as well. It's not expanding the yield, but it's by decreasing the waste, you are essentially expanding the yield. Also, it's very interesting that I know you work with farmers, male and female, but female farmers, we've learned, do not generally think of themselves as farmers. They think of themselves as helping around the farm. And of course, that if they don't think of themselves as having a business, and the business and their profession is farming, they're not going to be as inclined to go ask for help. And we think that having female extension agents who are automatically going to pay more attention to the women, and women are going to trust them, and they're going to take women seriously, is going to be a big help. So the first tool that we're going to talk about is one that you utilize. Nora, you can show us the next slide. Actually, you can run through the next couple of slides. They are all metal silos. You all know what a silo is. The size of the one on the left there is a small one. The one with the farmer doing a withdrawal is larger. That one is bigger yet. And that is, we can stop there, thanks. Just so you get an idea of what they look like. A metal silo is an innovation. Well, a metal silo is an old product, but the idea that you could have a small household silo designed for a smallholder farmer was an idea from the 1980s, and a Swiss nonprofit promoted it in Central America, and it was very, very successful. It's expensive the first year, but they're locally fabricated, and they brought in plans, and local tinsmiths learned how to do it. So it gave them business, especially during the quiet season. And it means that they know the culture, they know the materials, and they introduced it. Once the introduction was over and the program was no longer funded, two things were observed. One is that the program and the product stayed on the market. So they actually really changed the culture, and also that they last for generations. The ones from the 1980s, some of them are still around, and they are considered family heirlooms. They can be clean, they can be, if they get rusty, which is one problem, they can be repaired. If they get a hole, they can be repaired. But what they do is almost eliminate losses entirely. And they're typically used in Central America for corn. And they create a oxygen-free environment, and that kills all the insects that would have developed over time. So it prevents both interior deterioration, and it prevents critters from getting in. You see at the bottom, it has a chute or a little spigot. And this is designed for withdrawing grain as you go along. 1,000 kilograms is how much grain a family needs for storage for a whole season. But they come in a lot of different sizes. So the next slide, please. It does two things that are really important. It changes the economics of the whole season of farming. So this is showing you that it's creating an actual business, and they are in all different shapes and sizes, but the same thing, the grain goes in on the top and there's that chute at the bottom. Next slide, please. The way that it works is that in Central America, women control the corn, and in some places the women started putting locks on these silos because they wanted to make sure that the men weren't withdrawing it for things that they didn't approve of, but they were withdrawing it for things like school tuition and food when the family needed it. This is one of my favorite pictures. The innovation was transferred through what we call technology transfer to Africa, and introduced very successfully there. This is a woman in Kenya who is a chicken farmer, and these giant silos allow her to store enough food for the whole year for her chickens. So she can buy when chicken feed is cheap, and she can hold it safely. Next one, please. The economics, I think you're all familiar with this is more professional ones. women in business for themselves, and this is a way that they can take advantage of better pricing. And I'm going to show you a chart. The next one is the hunger season is when, the hunger season is when a typical farmer has run out of food, and the next season's crop is not yet in. That's when food, because it's based on supply and demand, gets the most expensive. And that's when people have the least income, because the income that they got from the beginning from selling their harvest is long gone. So the blue is what things are like at harvest time when prices are low, and red is what it's like during hunger season when prices are very high. So having a silo allows a smallholder family to move from having to buy food during the hunger season to having a little bit of a surplus that they can sell. That it's typically about a 10% difference, but what a difference that makes. It takes the family out of having to borrow money to pay when food is the highest, and instead they are sellers. We're going to talk about one more innovation, the next one, which is PICS bags. It was in my first book and I got to write about it again. They were originally called Purdue Improved Cowpea Storage. Cowpea are black-eyed peas, and they're a very perishable crop. They have an insect inside them typically that burrows there, and then once you store them, within about 6 weeks, the whole bag of crops is just dust. So it means that women, and it's a female crop, at least in Africa, it means that when they sell their peas, their black-eyed peas, they have cowpeas are called, they have to sell them at a really low price when the whole market is glutted, because if they hold on to them, they will turn into dust. PICS bags are hermetically sealed polypropylene bags. They're triple bagged, and they work perfectly. They have a great track record, so good now that we now call them Purdue Improved Crop Storage. They use them for about a dozen different crops. And the main problem was proving to people that they worked. So on the left, you see a man putting crops into a bag, and he has a date on the bag. And they then have open the bag ceremonies. The next one is our last picture, and I'll finish up. When they get people together at fairs and exhibitions, then they open the bag, and the open the bag ceremony, which you'll see a picture of next, is, or maybe not, whatever. They open the bag, and inside, instead of a bunch of dust and very well-fed insects, there we go. You can see 9 different crops in pristine shape. So this has been an enormous success, and I believe that they're now being introduced to Central America. It's a much cheaper technology than the silos. And again, it changes the economics, because people don't have to sell these crops right when they come to harvest. They can store them, and effective storage is really a miraculous thing that changes farmers and their families' lives. The PICS bags can be reused for quite a few seasons. I see somebody asked that. They don't need to be sanitized. They're triple bag. They can be patched even. They are creating somewhat of because they've been around for a while. We're going to have a lot of dead bags that we need to recycle, but hopefully that supply chain will gear up to. Dr. Kitanoja might have an update about that. Anyway, thanks everybody. I love talking about solutions that really change people's lives.
Thank you so much, Betsy, for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate you writing the book and making it available to extensionists like our team, who are able to, take those tools and get them out to the farmer. And so it makes a huge difference. Again, if you'd like to access the book or the download, the link is in the chat. We'll also make sure that's in the follow-up email that you'll get later on today. As we are let's see, getting some of our technology here. Betsy, one thing that I really appreciated about your book is, of course, it's hundreds of tools, and just flipping through it, self-help teams have been working in Ghana and Nicaragua for 20 years. I think on the screen we have a list of just some of the various tools that you talk about that are already in use by self-help teams. And I know some of our program staff is on the call, and they're going to give me a hard time later because I'm sure I've left off several of the tools as well. But specifically, some of the ones that you highlighted today were tool 58 in the book, tool 60 in the book, tool 90 in the book. And I want to talk a little bit more about how that looks in practice in self-help programs. So taking you down to Nicaragua, focusing on how we are empowering women. We are empowering women in Nicaragua through so many of these tools, but I wanted to in particular highlight the use of ag extension, cell phones, access to capital, biofortified foods, and post-harvest storage solutions. One of the things that's so beautiful about this book is that you really take us through the holistic nature of what it means to reduce post-harvest loss and waste, whether it's from farming to the pack house, to the value addition and food processing, to the storage, to the transportation, to the marketing, information and communications, technology, legal and financial, all of the value chain that goes into providing nutritious food on our tables, wherever our tables may be. And so with all of that effort that farmers go to make sure that they are keeping, producing beautiful crops for our table, we want to do what we can to reduce the loss and reduce the waste both. So Betsy, I'm going to come back to you at the end during our Q&A session and ask you a little bit more about ways that we in the Global North can contribute in our day-to-day lives as well. But first, we'll take a journey over to Nicaragua. And about a year and a half ago now, when COVID hit, our allies at CIMMYT and CIAT Harvest Plus reached out to Self-Help and said, you know, we've got these biofortified beans that we'd like to distribute, but we don't have the capacity to distribute them directly because of the way that COVID has affected our teams. Because Self-Help has a local staff that's locally hired and locally led, if disruptions occur, our teams are still there. They live in country, it's their communities, it's their culture. And so they're the ones that are carrying out the work day to day, regardless of what's happening in the world. And they're also directly affected, just like their colleagues and neighbors are. And so they're really the ones that know best what the communities need day in and day out. So when COVID hit, and Harvest Plus had these high iron and high zinc beans. And of course, those are so important because iron consumption is crucial for women of childbearing years and especially pregnant women who experience increased blood volume and need iron to maintain their healthy hemoglobin levels and transport oxygen throughout the body. For children, iron increases the formation of strong bones and teeth that will serve them well for the rest of their lives. And zinc in the beans is important for the body's immune system, which is critical to fend off diseases of any kind. And so having additional iron and additional zinc in your diet is going to be good for the entire family, but especially for women and children. And in order to consume those affordably, Harvest Plus has bred high iron and high zinc into beans that are already consumed in the community. And so Self-Help worked to do some distribution to introduce these high iron and high zinc biofortified beans in the communities. We're well suited to take innovations like this and put them into action and get them into the hands of the smallholder farmers that really can benefit most from those, because we've got connections in communities. We have the trust of community leadership. Our staff has the technical and extension expertise to be able to partner and facilitate that collaboration. And so last year, our team in Nicaragua distributed more than 1,700 pounds of biofortified beans that got to 137 farm families in 12 communities. And we distributed them free of charge, but what we did was we invited the farmers to, at the end of harvest, contribute back that same amount of beans so that they could be distributed to other farmers in the community and continue to multiply the supply of biofortified crops in the country for enhanced food security and nutrition security in particular. And so throughout that process, after the distribution was done, our staff relied on WhatsApp. Of course, you all remember it was the early days of COVID. And so people were advised to stay home and not gather. And so that changed our model of bringing people together to gather together for group training sessions. And we increasingly relied on cell phone communication, and in particular WhatsApp, which is a platform that lets you send text messages, video messages, photo messages, and audio messages. What it means is that even for a farmer who might not have a high degree of literacy, we can still communicate and offer training directly to their phones. It also often meant that there were multi-generational families that are farming, and sometimes the children were more actively involved with that training process with their parents, not dissimilar to the 4-H model here in the US. So as those communities were receiving the beans, we did that virtual training and remote training. And it was a cycle where at harvest time, the farmers would repay the crops in kind as crops, and then self-help would distribute them again. And we intentionally identified women farmers that we wanted to be working with, because of course, we wanted to make sure that the benefit is captured by all farmers, but in particular, women farmers. And so in addition to having the nutritional benefits, the farmers also saw an economic benefit. So CIMMYT, the International Center for Maize and Wheat Improvement, just published a working paper on bean production systems in Nicaragua. And what it showed, and this is like hot off the presses, I think it was published last week, is that producers in Nicaragua who plant improved varieties of beans, specifically these biofortified beans, obtain 11% higher yields than producers who do not plant this type of variety. So what that means is they're increasing their yields, so that's good for food security. And then, like Betsy was talking about, you need a storage solution. And so many of the farmers that we are working with in Nicaragua are working with the storage solution that is that metal grain bin. And so in the early days, a lot of what we were doing was issuing loans for those grain bins. The grain bins last many, many years. And so many of the farm families that we're working with today already have those grain storage bins, which is wonderful. They work for beans, they work for maize, they work for most of the staple crops. Here's one of the women that was part of the bean distribution in May of this year. And here's an image from September when further distribution was going on. What you can see on the right-hand side are several bags that are white with some pink and green and yellow to them. Those are branded bags that are Tu Maize is the brand, and it's high protein corn, that quality protein maize. And branding is also one of the important tools for reducing post-harvest loss, because it moves things off the shelves and keeps things moving. So self-help offers this combination of access to improved seed, whether it's biofortified beans or quality protein maize, but high nutrition quality seed, training on better information and technology so that they can put that training into action, and then capital as well. So through that suite of improved seed, training, and access to capital, last year some analysis was done by our country director, Jorge Campos, and ag economist and Nicaragua committee chair, William Edwards, who's also on the call today. And what they discovered was that by utilizing that suite of improved seed, training, and access to financing, farmers were able to increase their profit 6-fold. That is significant, 6-fold economic impact. So farmers are increasing the amount of crops that they are cultivating. They're then able to access storage solutions through microloans, and then able to continue to capture that profit margin. What we also see, just like we're experiencing inflation here, we're seeing disruptions to the global supply chain the world over. And so last year, we were able to disperse loans to 93 farmers, in September, we dispersed loans to 93 farmers. And in 2020, the loan that a farmer would need to be able to cultivate their crops and incorporate everything that they would need on time when they needed it was $200 per farmer. This year, the loan increased by $80 to $280 per farmer, a roughly 40% increase to be able to cultivate the same amount of crops on the same amount of land. So that 40% increase means that we either need to expand our pool of loans available, or decrease the number of farmers. And we'd much rather increase the pool of loans available. So as farmers are able to access that financing before planting, they utilize it, they repay after harvest, and then the cycle continues, and it can help more farmers. But because of inflation, that pool size is not going as far. So we'd like to invite you today, if you're interested, if you're able to support. A donation of $300 would allow us to keep pace with inflation and support an input loan for a farmer next year, potentially even expanding the number of farmers that we serve. And so we appreciate that invitation. Here in the photo, what you can see in the background are those storage solutions, and they're raised off the ground to further help with the distribution there. Now, there are a lot more program updates from Nicaragua, but first I want to take you on a journey over to Ghana, where you can see on the map our main office for the last 20 years has been in Kumasi at the Ministry of Food and Agriculture campus. So the local version of the USDA, and they give us an in-kind donation of office space, and we are able to work in hand with agricultural extension agents going out to the communities to support our integrated work to fight malnutrition, improve agriculture and crop yields, and empower women. And so in that process, over the last few years, you can see on the map there, we've been exploring increasing our impact in the Upper West region. My colleague Jessica is on the call. Just last week, she had the pleasure of taking that 11-hour car journey from Kumasi all the way up to Ulo, to that region. But the way that it came about is that self-help really focuses on being able to partner with others to increase our impact and making sure that we're invited and requested. So we found that partnerships are a highly effective way of supporting community development. What that looks like is that as community development workers and as extensionists, we partner with academic institutions, for example, Iowa State University in Iowa or KNUST in Kumasi, or with other experts in the area to be able to take academics' best practices and new information and get it to the farmer. In the words of Nobel Peace Prize laureate Dr. Norman Borlaug, take it to the farmer. So Self-Help's team in Ghana has this longstanding relationship with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and with KNUST, the local university in Kumasi. And recently, Engineers Without Borders chapters have opened up at Iowa State University and at KNUST that are collaborating with the community of Ulo in the Upper West region. And so a couple of years ago, my colleague Benjamin and I were interested in how do we better support farmers at harvest time to be able to store their grain better. And we'd heard about this new technology at KNUST. So we went over to see the solar grain dryer that they developed, and it was a mobile solar grain dryer. And as we walked up to talk to the professors, Benjamin, of course, right away knew the professor that was already working on the project, Dr. Joseph. And then the other gentleman was wearing an Iowa State cap, and it was Dirk Meyer, who is a key ally at Iowa State University. And they were working together through the Consortium for Innovation on Post-Harvest Loss and Food Waste Reduction. And so it's all of these synergies that came together that meant that subsequently Zach, whose father was the chief of the village of Ulo, visited Iowa for the World Food Prize. And we met, and he said, listen, I'd really like to learn more about Self-Help's model. My community could use some extra support. We've got a lot of dedication, and we aren't seeing a lot of additional support from other organizations. We'd really like to learn more about Self-Help's model. So Zach traveled to Kumasi and essentially interviewed our staff and other communities, talked with other communities that Self-Help works with, and said, okay, I trust you guys, and I'd like you to come into Upper West and work in our community. And so my colleagues, Benjamin, and at the time Victoria, went up to Upper West region of Ghana in Ulo and started talking with the community to make sure that we really were welcome and invited. And they asked us to start our work. And in March of 2020, our board of directors agreed that we would expand into the Upper West region of Ghana. And the following week, everything shut down. and everything went on hold. And so this past summer, we were able to actively resume those plans. And so colleague Nguo has joined our team as our program coordinator in Upper West. And I understand that as he goes around the communities, everybody knows him already. He is very well known. I was looking up some research articles the other day. I sent them to him and said, hey, what do you think about connecting with these professors? And he said, yeah, I know them well. What do we need? He already is so well connected to the community and knows how to support the community. But in spite of his connections, the first thing he wanted to do was listen to the community. So he's spent a lot of time in the communities getting to know what do people need, what do they want? And perhaps not surprisingly, the number one response was, look, our biggest barrier is poverty. It's a lack of economics, it's a lack of money, it's a lack of capital. We need that support. And so farming families, particularly women, bear that burden. What we know is that if women farmers had access to productive resources, if women farmers had the same access as men to productive resources, there would be somewhere in the range of 100 to 150 million fewer hungry people on our planet. So when we're talking about how do we really have targeted interventions, self-help ops to work with women whenever possible, because that really lets the impact go further. So Constantine was listening to the community, working with local leaders, and we collaborated with KNUST's Engineers Without Borders, and they did a training in the community on how do we store shea nuts. Shea nut is the most common produce in the area, and you might have seen it in shea butter products that we tend to consume. Nice lotion here. So as we were working with the shea nut farmers, they were saying, look, we need additional support. And there was a training on PICS bags, and they said, this is so great, but here's the thing. Even though they're affordable, even though they're only $2 a bag, we can't access them affordably here. There was only one dealer in the area, and they were not being sold at affordable rates. So after hearing that, Self-Help issued our first loans 3 weeks ago in the Upper West region to 2 women. I think we have some images of them. There they are, Agnes and Elizabeth. Elizabeth is in the green dress on the left there. Agnes is on the right. And they were the first 2 women that accessed loans in the area, and they took those PICS bags and then resold them. And as of yesterday, they'd sold 75% of the bags in the area. So they accessed them at a rate of 10 CDs, which is $2. They resold them at a small profit, and they'll be able to then repay their loans. And now the women in the area are able to store their crops. And just like Betsy was saying, it's essentially increasing your harvest by being able to preserve your yield longer. What it allows them to do is store their crops, transport them to market, and they're going to get a much better price than if that food had been wasted or lost. So Self-Help provided the logistical support this year by accessing the PICS bags and transporting them up to Upper West and being able to do that distribution. In the future, our goal is to link the women directly to that supply chain so that we'll be able to issue loans to still support their businesses, but that they have the choice and have the option and have the connections to be able to operate their businesses without that additional intervention. Constantine, who's on the left there, is also doing some basic business and financial management trainings for the business owners now. And then in the next year, what we hope to do is, because Constantine is just one person, grow that team by bringing on 1 or 2 more program officers to further support our work to empower women. Those are 2 of the many highlights throughout the programs. I hope many of you on the call were able to get our impact report, our 2020 impact report. If you're not on our mailing list, please reach out to me so that we can get you that information. But there are just so many amazing things that are happening every day, whether it's communities accessing clean water in rural Nicaragua, a lot of leadership training that's going on with supporting the clean water and sanitation committees through leadership transition. Whenever there's an election in the community, it means that someone new is working on that team. And so making sure that they are well suited to be able to support clean water efforts. Working daily with women in nutrition. Our vision for Upper West and ULO is that we're starting with working with women in agriculture, and then we'll be incorporating our Growing Healthy Food, Growing Healthy Children program that fights malnutrition down the line. What we've seen is that we can be most effective when we partner with communities and establish those trusting relationships first based on that sustainable model, and then introduce the additional interventions that focus more on direct nutrition and consumption down the road. And so that's where we'd like to go with that program. We appreciate your time today. I know there are so many more highlights I'd like to share, but first I want to make sure that we're acknowledging that, you know, there's so much we can do. One of the ways that you can support is by making a donation. You can donate now by credit card, by check, by donor advised fund. There are lots of ways. If you want to find a way to give, we'll work with you to make that happen. In fact, we now even accept vehicles, trucks, boats, you name it. We can take that and turn it into an impact with you. There are also ways that we can live our lives to support post-harvest loss and waste reduction. And so, Betsy, would you tell us about some of those things that we can be doing in our day-to-day? I'm going to see if I can invite you to unmute there. Yeah, exactly. If you shout a little bit.
I
There
would
you
love
go.
to. I'm going to say three things. The first is, in America, we love to buy things in bulk. We love Costco, we love Sam's Club, I as much as anyone. And it's just, I think it's really important to just do careful inventory that we don't accumulate too much. It's very easy. Our houses are big, our pantries are big. I'm sure that your communities have food pantries. If you really, I try to remember, if I buy a lot of something, maybe I could donate a few of them rather than have them sit there in my closet. I want to talk about composting. I'm sure that you are familiar with composting, but you, like me, might be a complete failure at composting. So what I've done over the years is gotten together with a couple of like-minded neighbors. One of my neighbors had chickens, and she was really happy for my compost. So if you find somebody or somewhere that can use it, just get a 5-pound bucket and you save it up. And in where I live in Philadelphia, you can pay for composting services, which I have been kind of cheap. It bothered me to do that, but I got together with 3 neighbors, and the 3 of us in a week fill 5-pound buckets. It's one household. It's not very practical, but just figure out, see where you're blocked, and maybe get together with some friends or through your church or through your neighbors and see how to do that better. And the last thing you can do is get better informed and advocate for uniform labeling. There's a conflict between the producers of food, who are always interested in selling more product, and the consumers of food, who really want to be conscientious and not get sick from eating something that is spoiled. So we have very vague language. Sometimes it says sell by, sometimes it says goodbye, sometimes it has expiration date, and those are just mostly random and put on by the manufacturer. They're not meaningful in any way. So some things have a really, really long shelf life. And if you're tossing them because there was an expiration date, make sure that you're not just being bamboozled into wasting that food and then going out and buying more. And we need better, I know Iowa's an agricultural state, so it would probably be a topic that would be of interest to Iowans to really work on that.
Thank you, Betsy. I see we have another question in the chat here. Can rodents penetrate the storage bags?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. As of the research that I did, it's a triple bag, and it doesn't, you can't smell the contents. So they are fairly impenetrable. Sometimes a rodent might get through the first layer, but I could not find any examples of their getting through to the contents of the bag. Thank heavens. I mean, you have to follow other sanitation rules. You need to raise them off the ground from keep them away from moisture. And if they're in a granary, the granary needs to be ventilated. It's more complicated than just bagging them. But in general, they're quite effective.
Thanks, Betsy. If there are any other questions, you're welcome to raise your hand in this feature or type them in the chat. It looks like what's flashing on our screens here are different donation options, and we're also going to put those links in the chat for ways to donate and support this work. Many of you already have sent in gifts, and we are so grateful. If you would like to do more, we would welcome that, and it would be gratefully appreciated. We'll get the mailing address is there in the chat, or you can click on that link and it will take you to where you can make a gift online today. We are really excited about the ways that we are continuing to be able to support communities to meet them where they're at and continue to walk together on this journey. And as we support one community and they graduate away from our programs, we're able to work with new and different communities. Certainly the demand or the invitations to work in communities exceeds our capacity today. And so we're continuing to work hard to make sure that we can meet that by first listening to what the communities want and need, and then being able to mobilize our teams to provide those resources. And it's only possible because of the generosity of donors who want to join us in this journey and choose self-help to be your partner in impact. So we really appreciate your time and all of your ongoing support. I see so many familiar names and faces on the call, and I'm grateful to see you virtually. We are hoping that we will be able to gather again in person next year in a safe manner that supports all of our health. And until then, I want to wish you a very happy holiday and express so much gratitude. So much of what we're doing is because of the folks on this call. Over the last few years, this luncheon is the reason that we are able to expand our programming and scale up. So we truly are grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with you to make this impact today. I'm going to stay on the call if anybody has questions. We're glad to continue to take them. It's not quite the same as being able to disperse after lunch and have our side chats, but feel free to share if you'd like to stay and chat or stay and share any words of wisdom or advice or ask any questions. We're here. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. It makes such a difference. Margaret, I see that you have a question about the loan program. Do most farmers get new loans each growing season? Do the funds roll to another recipient? Both. So just like here in the US, where farmers will regularly access financing to be able to support their crops and crop expansion, the same is true with self-help. So what we do is we start with more entry-level loans and then scale up and work with the farmers as they continue to grow their businesses. Our goal is to be able to support farmers to graduate to commercial banking options. In the places that we're working in, commercial banking options do exist, but oftentimes they don't exist for farmers that don't have a lot of capital or collateral or formal education. And so what we see is our role is bridging that gap of helping farmers become part of the formal banking sector and banked. And so in the interim, what we're able to do is support farmers with increasing loan levels until they get there. What we're working on right now is being able to formally document the loan records that we have with the farmers so that we can share those with the bank and be able to create more of a collaboration where we say we vouch for these farmers. We've seen that year in and year out, their repayment rates are strong and that they are credit worthy, essentially, and being able to better bridge that gap more holistically. So some of the farmers receive a loan just for one season. Some of them receive loans on ongoing seasons. One of the keys is that we do expect that whatever our training is, that's how they're using the loans, is to put that training into action. So it wouldn't necessarily be a loan for some other crop that is more traditional methods. We're working specifically with people who've come to our trainings and are seeking to be able to put that training into action, but aren't able to due to lack of financing. Another question here in the chat is, what are the differences, if any, in the interest rates between self-help loans and commercial loans? Great question. And so we charge a flat rate. We issue the loans and then we have a fee. We call it interest, but it's in practice just a fee that is on par with what the commercial banks charge, but it doesn't include any other hidden fees or backup fees or hidden charges the way that commercial banks do. And the reason is that we want to graduate people to that commercial bank. And so that fee helps offset the cost of our training. All of our training is provided free, but the fee helps with any training costs, but most of what it goes to is being able to expand that loan pool and be able to offer loans to more people. So our goal is certainly not to make a profit out of anybody. Our goal is to be able to support farmers to grow that pool and meet people where they're at. But what we don't want to do is undercut the local systems that are already in place by setting preferential rates or fees. So we match what the going rate is, so to speak, in the area. Oh my gosh. Thank you for all of your wonderful messages. Ambassador Quinn, thank you for joining us. Gina Hegney in St. Louis, thank you for joining us. Dick Murphy, we're so glad that you're here. Margaret, thank you for joining us. I'm sure I'm missing people. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat. Lisa, I'm so glad that you were able to join us as the editor of the book, Working with Betsy. Daria, thank you. We're grateful that you're all on the call here. If anybody else has questions, I'm glad to speak to those, and Betsy's still on the call and available to speak to them as well. Margaret's asking, what is